Let's move on from the Energy tab to the Cost tab. Let's just review the costs that should be summarized or appear somewhere in the Cost tab. First, we have the initial costs. In the base case, it's the generator. It's $10,000 US. For the proposed case system, we've already included the costs in various locations in the Energy tab, but we should ensure that they appear somewhere in the Cost tab. So those are the inverter costing $3,500, the battery costing $9,206, and the array costing $7,000 for a total of $19,706. Then we have the annual operation and maintenance costs. In the base case, we've included US $400 per year on the in the Energy tab. For the proposed case, we've stated that they are going to be zero because we're counting on the homeowner to take care of things. For the fuel costs, we don't know what those should be. It depends on the savings. We could do a quick calculation to figure that out, but let's leave that up to RETScreen to figure out, and just we'll verify that they appear somewhere on the cost page. The diesel-powered generator will need to be replaced after 20,000 hours, and we're assuming that's going to cost US $8,000. The batteries for the photovoltaic system will also need to be replaced. Currently, we're assuming they cost $9,206 initially. After 13 years, I'm going to estimate they need replacement. Typically, such lithium-ion batteries might last 10 to 15 years, so that's somewhere in the middle of their lifetime. I'm going to use $7,000 instead of $9,206 because the price of batteries is coming down. Now, you might argue that, well, battery prices may be coming down, but over time inflation will cause all prices, including those of batteries, to go up. However, when we specify costs in RETScreen, we're actually specifying the costs in today's money. So RETScreen will apply inflation to these numbers. The inverter replacement, similarly, I'm assuming is going to be a little bit less in 15 years than what it is today, at least in today's dollars. So today it costs $3,500 for the inverter. I'm going to assume that in 15 years the same inverter could be purchased for $3,000 in today's money. On the Cost tab, on level 1, that is the most simplified analysis, the costs that we entered on the Energy tab for the proposed case system have been carried over. So we see the $19,706. We also see some fuel costs here. We'll need to take a little bit of a closer look at those, but those obviously come from the base case system. What we don't see here is a good location to put in replacement costs for the diesel power generator, for the battery, and for the inverter 7, 13, 15 years in the future. So in order to get a form of the cost page where we have a logical place to insert those costs, we need to go to level 2 or 3, but we'll use level 2. And this is a slightly more detailed analysis that includes periodic costs. So if I go down here, I can see that there's a section for periodic costs where I can include the inverter, battery, and generator replacement costs. So while we've gained the periodic cost section, we've lost something though. If you look, the total initial costs are now blank, 0. So whereas those were correctly specified as 19,706 in the level 1 analysis, in level 2 they're no longer included. Why is that? Because we now have a lot more line items that would allow us to fill out the costs, the initial costs, in detail, and RETScreen's assumed we're going to use those line items to do it in detail. However, that's not what we want to do here. We just want to carry over the costs, so we're going to have to manually include those. So let's do that. Let's start with the initial costs here, and I'm going to go to Power System here, and I'm going to include initially the proposed case PV system, and I'm going to lump all the costs together. We've got one system, I'm going to say that, and its costs are $19,706 US. However, we also have the base case costs. So in the base case, we have a system that has a cost of $10,000. Of course, it's a cost in the base case, but from the perspective of the proposed case, that is, we're looking at the incremental cost of the proposed case compared with the base case, this is actually should be a negative number. So I'm going to include this as a credit, which then subtracts the $10,000 of the base case from the $19,706 of the proposed case to come up with the incremental initial costs of $9,706 here. So now we're good for the initial costs. If we go down here for the annual costs, we don't have to worry about the proposed case. We're assuming that's zero, but we don't really see anything for the $400 per year for the base case. However, if you look carefully here, the unit cost for diesel here is $6.84 per gallon. Seems a bit strange given that we specified that it was $4.80. And in fact, what's going on there is that, returning to the energy page, RETScreen is folding this annual O&M cost into the fuel cost and coming up with a lumped figure that works out to the correct total electricity cost of $1,343 per year. And so going back to the cost page, we see that yes, that's the same number there. So it's just included the diesel quantity correctly and adjusted the price so that this number works out correctly. So the $400 is in there, as well as the fuel costs. They're being included. So what remains is the periodic costs. So the first of these, of course, is going to be the base case diesel generator replacement. And these are going to last 20,000 hours, but we're running it about 3,000 hours per year. So it's going to last about 7 years. And that's probably a bit optimistic unless we do an overhaul because it's operating at such a low loading level on average. The unit cost we said was going to be around $8,000 US for a replacement. And this is not a cost from the perspective of the proposed case. It's a credit. It's something that we don't have to do. We do not have to pay for if we do the proposed case. So it's a credit in that case. In contrast, we have to replace the battery in the proposed case. So we put this in as a cost. This is truly a cost. And I think we said that it was going to be after 13 years. And it was going to be, I believe we said $7,000. And we also said that there was going to have to be inverter replacement in the proposed case. Also a cost. This we're assuming is after 15 years, and that was going to be $3,000. And just as I mentioned before, these are today's costs for these systems. These values, these number values, are going to be inflated by RETScreen such that 13 or 15 years in the future, we're going to see that the number value that RETScreen applies is larger than 7,000, larger than 3,000, because it assumes that inflation has occurred. So a little bit of a fine, tricky point there, but just in case you ever look carefully at the replacement costs that are being used by RETScreen, they're these numbers with inflation implied. That covers the cost tab. In the next video, we'll look at the emissions analysis.